This is MuggleCast, the Harry Potter podcast discussing everything about J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World. Welcome to MuggleCast 370, another landmark episode. I'm Andrew.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Micah.
We've got a relaxed episode of the show this week. It's the Memorial Day weekend. We're going to have a mailbag, and we're gonna open up the mailbag, and we're going to have a
There is a mailbag, let's be clear.
Yes. And we're going to have a discussion on origin stories, because with the latest Star Wars movie, it's Han Solo origin movie, we're going to talk about what origin stories we might want to see out of the Wizarding World, since the Wizarding World seems to be expanding more and more these days. So we'll look at a few character options. But it is the unofficial start of summer. So many memories for Harry Potter fans, right? The book releases, so many of them over the summer. A few movie releases.
So funny because Harry himself does not like summer, right? It's when he's got to go back to the Dursleys and suffer. But all of us have gotten the latest detail, the latest experiences that he has all came out in the summer, you're right.
Yeah. J.K. Rowling was like, I'm going to make you hate summer, Harry, but I'm going to make all my fans love it.
Yeah.
And I've been rereading Order of the Phoenix, and yesterday I was reading it on the beach. I was like, brings back memories of reading it for the first time in 2003.
That was 15 years ago, almost to the month.
Actually, since there is an anniversary coming up, we will have an announcement at the end of today's program.
Yeah.
For now, though, little news item I just wanted to mention briefly. J.K. Rowling, she said something interesting on Twitter. She's not tweeting a ton of stuff about Harry Potter these days, unless there's a Battle of Hogwarts anniversary that she needs to apologize during.
It comes but once a year.
She needs more anniversaries that she can make these big announcements on, by the way.
Agree.
But I think she revealed the chapter she had the hardest time writing. Because one thing she does on Twitter frequently is she likes to inspire and motivate budding writers. Like, some people will be like, oh, if J.K. Rowling can push through it, I can do it too. And then J.K. Rowling's like, you go, girl. And then this week, somebody was like, I have been writing a chapter for a week. I have rewritten a single chapter 40 times because I can't get it right. And then she said, how do you get past that? And then J.K. Rowling said, Chapter 9 of Goblet of Fire nearly finished me. I rewrote it more times than I can now remember. You'll get there. Chapter 9 of Goblet of Fire is The Dark Mark.
Huh. So they're at the Quidditch World Cup.
Yeah. Pretty busy chapter, so I guess that's why it nearly finished her. Was she trying to also work in, like, the timing of Crouch's whereabouts, maybe? Like, was that difficult as well?
Yeah, that's one of those chapters where there's more going on, but we don't know about it at the time. Mm-hmm. Because, like, Winky and Barty Crouch are there under an invisibility cloak. I think it's probably, like, building the space out is probably what she had to do to, like, who's running through the forest at what point, and kind of just, like, figuring out the overall chronology. Or maybe she just wrote it and was like, the dialogue is weak, or the dialogue is not, enough. And
yeah,
it's sort of an interesting chapter to finish her, though, because there have certainly been longer chapters, even in that book, and that do more. But I understand her need for perfection, and I think there are a couple of things being balanced there.
Probably depends to the order in which she wrote the chapters, because I'm sure she had the end of the book in mind before going back and writing the earlier chapters, but trying to weave those threads through and make sure that everything connected. I can imagine it'd be interesting to ask her, was chapter 9 the last chapter in Goblet of Fire that she wrote or finished up?
That's a good question.
Because if that were the case, I think it would make a lot of sense.
What cracks me up is that this book was published in 2000, so she was probably writing it in 99. She remembers specifically that chapter 9 of Goblet of Fire that she wrote 20 years ago was the one that was the hardest.
Well, and she also, though, this was before she gave herself the time, right? Because the Goblet of Fire, she was rushed to write in the same amount of time that she had written the first 3.
Right.
And I think that we might actually have this chapter to thank for the fact that she made us then wait 3 years for every book.
Right.
Or 2 years after that, because she's like, I'm done. I'm tired of being rushed. I need the space.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. I hope the publishers weren't like, oh, okay, if you really say so. The whole series could have been done by like 2003 if she kept up with one a year type of schedule.
I can't imagine.
There's just a big number 9 up on her bulletin board next to her desk, so that it's a constant reminder.
And she throws darts at it. Yeah.
Never forget Chapter 9 of Goblet of Fire. And yeah, I mean, if she was under pressure to finish writing by a certain time and she just couldn't get that chapter right, that would be enormously stressful, pulling all-nighters to get that right. Mm-hmm. All right, so there you go. I would love to hear more anecdotes from, like, writing the Harry Potter series. We don't hear enough of them, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree.
Because when Pottermore launched this book club on social media, I was hoping that J.K. Rowling would pop in from time to time, and I think one of the things I suggested was J.K. Rowling could be like, oh yeah, this chapter was really fun to write because, or oh, this chapter, that was something else, or oh, this chapter I almost didn't include it in the final book because, like, just like fun stuff like that would be so cool to hear.
Did they launch their book club?
Yeah, they launched it like months ago.
Well, so talk about a whimper. I didn't hear anything about it.
They have so they probably retweet some stuff from the Pottermore account, but they also have a special Twitter account called WW Book Club.
Oh, that's what I'm missing out on. Okay,
yeah.
So I was going to say if the majority, because I get Pottermore tweets to my phone, but
I actually
not this WW
unfollowed their book club Twitter account because I wasn't following along and it wasn't what I was hoping. So I was like, okay, I'm out.
Sure.
Well. So, like I said, our main discussion this week is going to be about origin stories, and later in the episode, we got a bunch of voicemails to get through, and a couple of emails as well, some fun theories, some fun fandom questions, actually. So, a lot to get to today. Eric, you saw Solo, right?
Yeah, and you did too. And Micah joked with us that he saw Solo, but you didn't actually see Solo, did you, Micah?
No, it would have been a very short movie because it took about 30 seconds for my wisdom tooth to come out the other day. So maybe I saw the commercial up on the TV and in the dentist office, and that was about it.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm not a huge fan of these types of films. I'll just start by saying that. Not to say that the movies themselves are not good. I don't like the whole spin-off idea. And particularly with Star Wars, I didn't like them going back and even creating the first 3 episodes, never mind creating, 7, 8, and 9. And so now that we're in the space of creating even more movies, so that I'm just going to level set at the beginning by saying that.
Sure.
I think you need to let things stand how they are. I'm a believer in that. And we can certainly talk about Fantastic Beasts and Potter in that respect as well, but I'm not going to dismiss how good or not good the movie was. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
Is it sort of like, for you, is it series fatigue? Like you're just tired of seeing Star Wars?
Why is it needed? It feels like you're trying to like milk the cow and there's no milk left,
Well, to tie this into Harry Potter, I mean, this is a question we might be facing in a few years' time after Fantastic Beasts, or even maybe before the final Fantastic Beasts movie comes out.
I think you are to some extent, right? Because the Fantastic Beasts series, as much as it is about Newt, is really about Dumbledore, and it is a spin-off in a way. It's going back and finding a way to really tell his story as much as it is to tell Newt's story. So I think we're already getting some of that in Fantastic Beasts.
So I think for me, at least with Star Wars, I won't speak to Harry Potter at this time, but if we could just talk about Star Wars on this Harry Potter podcast, that'd be great. I think that it's more like a language that's being spoken. A lot of people, Star Wars is very, very, very big. It's a global phenomenon. So I think that when they make a new Star Wars movie, it is a sort of like coming home at the end of a day and getting a new installment that, something. I think most of the good Star Wars movies and all good science fiction tells us more about ourselves and the human condition. And I think the fact that these movies are so ridiculously popular means, a lot of them are actually also really well made, and they just tell us things about ourselves. I think from a narrative standpoint and a character standpoint, you go to relate to characters we already understand. I think that's the thing is, movies would be less successful if they had all new characters that we didn't connect with, or they just have to spend more time connecting with all new characters every time. Think of a world where there'd be no sequels at all, of anything. And I some days I want to live in that world.
Yeah.
I get series fatigue as much as the next guy. But for Star Wars, it's like, this is this massive thing, and we're going to offshoot to go somewhere we haven't gone before. And if they do it right, they're at least doing some new things in the format of something old.
With Solo, we actually, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. We're here to talk about
right.
Solo Harry Potter character stories. But in Solo, and this leads into our discussion today, they reveal things like the first time Chewie and Han piloted the Falcon together, how Han got his last name, how Han met Lando, and those dice that we see in some of the movies that he hangs up or whatever. I'm a casual
dice.
Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
But so it opens up the character, and Han Solo is obviously a beloved, iconic character. So the other question here is, when we're talking about these Harry Potter characters, how could it be marketed? Could they feasibly do a Solo movie about a Wizarding World character and have it be a success? Because they would only do it in the hopes of it making a ton of money. Interestingly, Solo is probably going to be the worst Star Wars movie box office-wise. Disney had to lower their box office expectations over the weekend because they could already tell it wasn't going to live up to what they thought it would. So that's a factor, too. In fact, I'm just reading now that it's struggling to hit $115 million in the U.S. And not doing well overseas. That said, Eric, you liked it, right?
I liked it.
I liked it, too. But that's the thing. I just liked it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't think it was necessarily groundbreaking, but within the confines of a Star Wars movie, there's still, some things to like about it, some bold choices, some unexpected plot turns here and there. I'm thinking, of course, of Emilia Clarke's character, who's in it, and it's all sort of interesting. So I tend to love sort of the continuity of the in-world stuff. Like, if you watch it, you can tell you're in a Star Wars world based on how the sets look and how the props look and the presence of droids. And they do things with, droids' rights. Reminds me of House Elf rights, that subplot in Goblet of Fire. Like, some interesting things in universe that only this latest entry has done. And I think that J.K. Rowling isn't outside or above the idea of, contributing social factors and other things into what would otherwise be one man's story or one woman's story. I think that what makes good stories, and J.K. Rowling's written quite a few of them, is, having a number of characters that are all fighting for a cause. And I think that if they do a Harry Potter solo character story, just like Solo did a solo character story, it could be cool.
So here's what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to exclude Dumbledore from this discussion since, as Micah mentioned, Fantastic Beasts is looking more and more like a Dumbledore story. But let's start with our thoughts on Hogwarts professors and then other adult characters. And then we'll get into suggestions from our patrons. We asked them to submit some ideas, and they have some really good ones. First of all, I think, Eric, you added this, Professor Quirrell.
Yeah.
I would totally agree with that. I think we were just talking about this in the Slug Club chat earlier. Lottie brought this up. Quirrell would be a great character because, in my opinion, we would get to see how eventually Voldemort hooked into the back of his head. Like, that is a good endpoint for a story here, and potentially very interesting to Harry Potter fans. But Eric, what else could they see in the town?
Well, Quirrell, we don't know much about him, of course, but, in book 1, we see him very briefly in the Leaky Cauldron before he's specifically joined with Voldemort. But he was an accomplished wizard, and I think Hagrid says as much to Harry. But there's just something about Quirrell that when he was studying abroad in Albania, and of course it's unfortunately that same lucky forest where Voldemort happened to be, and that's where he succumbs to the influence of Voldemort and eventually becomes his servant. I don't necessarily think Quirrell was like a bad dude, or certainly not a dark wizard before running into Voldemort, so he was kind of like a scholar. He was kind of just like this dude. The whole mystery surrounding his turban, and everyone at school has a different theory about what it's for, whether it's, garlic to ward off vampires or, whatever. It's just kind of interesting ambiguity that he lives in. And we don't know much about him, which is kind of the most exciting thing, in seeing his story. He could be anybody. He could be anything. And I think I remember reading that he survives that encounter with Harry at the end of book 1. So where does he go? What does he do?
Well, on Pottermore, it says that he died in 1992.
Yeah, I don't think he did survive. I'm just looking as well, which makes sense. I mean, how do you be two people and then not?
What? Separation.
There's no coming back from that. I mean, I would just die from embarrassment alone.
I was sure he lived. That's my bad then.
What do you think, Micah?
There's a lot of, if you read through Pottermore, there's some interesting information on Quirrell that's written by J.K. Rowling. She says that she saw him as a gifted but delicate boy who would probably have been teased for his timidity and nerves during his school life. Feeling inadequate and wishing to prove himself, he developed an initially theoretical interest in the dark arts. Like many people who feel themselves to be insignificant, even laughable, Quirrell had a latent desire to make the world sit up and notice him. So that's sounds like the beginning to a film right there, right? If you start out with Quirrell as this young Hogwarts student that's being teased and made fun of, and what does he grow to be? And eventually he encounters Voldemort. And it's actually mentioned in here, too, that Quirrell would have been the type of person that would have expected himself to be able to take down Voldemort. So there is a little bit of that inside of him, and I wonder if that is what drove him initially to encounter him, or it was just happenstance that they came across each other.
Mm-hmm. Another character that I think so many people would love, and frankly way more than Quirrell, is McGonagall. I mean, this is a straight A student. She passed her AL. She passed her newts. She was a prefect, head girl, winner of the Transfiguration Today Most Promising Newcomer Award. She's an inspiring character for everybody, probably one of the most iconic. I mean, she has some amazing scenes throughout the series. Everybody just loves McGonagall. An origin story for her would probably be interesting, but the only problem is that her backstory it's not the most exciting thing.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
It's very sort of depressing. There's love that cannot be pursued. There's the burden that secrecy, the role of secrecy plays on her entire family. The Pottermore writing on Professor McGonagall by J.K. Rowling is lengthy and brilliant, but very sad.
Yeah. She fell in love with a Muggle boy. I actually would find that kind of interesting to follow. I think that would be a very interesting story and kind of relatable for fans, because it'd be like, what would happen if I fell in love with a wizard? Like, we could see the issues with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be fun to see that movie.
But it'd be fun to do because it was a different time in the wizarding world, right? And it's before the wars and that sort of thing. I mean, just seeing an inside teacher's life would be kind of cool. I mean, some of this backstory is talking about how she befriended Professor Sprout, how she and Professor Flitwick were both hat stalls, but with opposite results. That they were both either between Gryffindor or Ravenclaw, and McGonagall was eventually sorted into Gryffindor and Flitwick was sorted into Ravenclaw. But apparently they joke that they could be each other's heads of house, or opposite heads of house, inner staff room type stuff. I would love to see a story written about it, at the very least.
There has to be something epic going on here, though, in any of these. Like, if we're seriously considering the prospect of one of these actually happening, like Fantastic Beasts leading up to this Grindelwald Dumbledore duel. Of course, Harry Potter has its own epic story. Like, what would really draw people in here? It'd have to be something J.K. Rowling hasn't written about yet. Oh, there was that one Wizarding War in between Wizarding Wars 1 and 2. I haven't told you about it.
Right. Well, what gets a name drop? It's kind of like the Kessel Run, right? It's like they've made the Kessel Run into a substantial part of the Solo movie. I'm glad it's not the climactic final battle thing, but, you know, it was mentioned once in the first Star Wars, and all of a sudden now it's a set piece.
Right.
You know, so what is it about? Is it McGonagall's turning into a cat? Because it says she was always, gifted at Transfiguration. Like, you know, she was taught by Dumbledore in Transfiguration. So I guess Dumbledore must have changed careers a lot of times between what teachers he was being. But, you know, I think that there would have to be something. You're right.
Coming this November, learn how Professor McGonagall changed into a cat. I don't know. I don't see it. That's not selling me.
Yeah. Well, maybe a McGonagall one wouldn't work. Who's next?
Maybe it's more of a Lifetime movie.
This is the discussion we should be having.
learning to accept heartbreak and learning to deal and overcome and still manage to be a great resource for people who need you.
Which Harry Potter character should get their straight to DVD film? How about Horace Slughorn? Micah, you're a Slughorn fan.
Yeah, I like Professor Slughorn. He's an interesting character, not just because I think Jim Broadbent does a great job playing him in the films, but there's a lot of history there that is definitely suspect, right? We see it come to the surface in Half-Blood Prince, and we know he's Slytherin, head of house, right, by... at least by the end of the Potter series, and he's a very interesting character in the sense that he's been involved with a young Voldemort. He's been involved with Tom Riddle, and maybe some of this will play out in the Fantastic Beasts films, just knowing that he's a potential character that could, we can see. What is he all about? You know, growing up, I don't know that we have too much information on him. And, the Slug Club, what causes somebody to want to create sort of that elitist group within Hogwarts and want to collect people? I mean, there is a very much a Slytherin type undertone to Slughorn, right? When you think about that, you think about creating an elite club, collecting people, regardless of what house they're from, regardless of, if they're, sort of no wizarding blood or if they're pure blood. He doesn't seem to discriminate in that sense, as long as they help to elevate his profile.
Yeah. And he was the potions teacher for a really long time. Back in the day. I think it was like 1920s to 80s or something like that. So, and he had the Slug Club going, I think, that whole time. So I think it'd be interesting to see the adventures of the Slug Club as well. Like, what makes this guy really want to, like you said, Micah, collect them? Like, why does he get a kick out of that? It's kind of creepy to me.
I think it's self-serving.
I think it has... Right. It was very self-serving, but I think it comes out of a desire to be... I think he knows that he himself is not special. And I think that that's the thing, is if he surrounds himself with people that can give him something or forge connections that he can manipulate to get stuff in return, that's and as Micah said, elevate himself, that will be... that's just the route he goes.
Mm-hmm. So there's definitely the potential, if he is teaching there for 60 years starting in the 20s, that he can pop up during these Fantastic Beasts films, and just given his relationship later on with Tom Riddle, but I wonder if there's any relationship that he had with Newt, and what about even it's not mentioned, at least as far as I know, any sort of significant other or, and any children. So maybe that also is playing into some of what he's feeling. If he's feeling isolated, the way for him to kind of deal with that isolation is to create this club and to have all these, up and coming witches and wizards surround him.
If he's teaching since the 20s, I wonder what his behavior was like during the Chamber of Secrets incident in the 40s, when the chamber was opened for the first time and the school was nearly closed and a girl died. Because he does tend to get really shady when stuff is going on, and I think that he would have been under a lot of pressure to produce results about, this said Slytherin's chamber as head of house back then, if he was.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Some good opportunities there. The only other thing I have to add about Slughorn is you could call it Oho, a wizarding story.
Let's talk about Hagrid. I actually think he would be the best choice for an origin story.
Really?
He is a lovable, likable, friendly character. He's one of the first wizard characters we see in the book. He has that iconic moment, "You're a wizard, Harry." That line, more than any other line, I think the general public, could recite from a Harry Potter movie. He is just so closely tied to Harry's story. He's a father figure to Harry. He's, a mother figure, if we're going off of the discussion we had a week or two ago. I just think he's a very marketable character because he is so likable. That said, I know some people are like, "Oh, I hate Hagrid." But I don't think his years, Eric had written here, what did Hagrid do the many years of being a groundskeeper? I don't think his gardening is very interesting, but I think...
I just want to see him gardening, snargle up pods and helping sprout out.
I think helping people, I think seeing him during the First Wizarding War could be very interesting. His upbringing with his mother and father that he had a strained relationship with could be interesting. And just being an outsider, being this half giant, somebody who doesn't fit in, and yet still turning out to be such a nice person who just wants to help. And I think maybe this could open up to a wider discussion on just following the original Order of the Phoenix. Would be a very interesting story.
That is a good point. I like that.
Because there's a ton of characters you can bank on.
Yeah.
Right, but if you think about it, the formation of the Order of the Phoenix, just telling the story there, you could probably come up with one film just by itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have all the Marauders joining Dumbledore and other, very prominent wizards. You have the fall of Frank and Alice Longbottom, the fall of Lily and James Potter, but also their successes that lead them to be so widely acclaimed leading up to that. It wouldn't have a happy ending necessarily, but we know Voldemort's defeated eventually.
Yeah. There's that tragic story with Hagrid's mother leaving his dad to raise him on his own. And I just think that would be such an adorable story to see.
Lifetime.
Lifetime. Okay.
Some of these would be more Lifetime stories. But...
How about some other adults who aren't teachers? The problem with the teachers is they all seem to dedicate their lives to Hogwarts. So they have no life outside of Hogwarts.
Boring.
When we were talking, we didn't have this in the discussion, but I added it while we were just talking. Tom Riddle. And you can work in Horace and Dumbledore during that story. How did Dumbledore become Voldemort? How did Tom Riddle become Voldemort? There would be an amazing story there. And I think one of our patrons pointed out that the reason she likes Half-Blood Prince so much is because there are those cool backstories that you get there in regards to Tom Riddle.
Yeah, I like those backstories too a lot, but I am holding out hope still that by the time these Fantastic Beasts films are over, we will know a lot more about young Voldemort. Mm-hmm. I'm fully expecting Tom Riddle to show up. He was born in 1927 at the very last day, which is the year that the first Fantastic Beasts is set. And we will, if the series ends in 1945, not to reiterate what we've already said on past MuggleCast, but as a reminder, if the movies end in 1945, that is 3 years after the Chamber of Secrets was opened by Tom Riddle the first time, and Hagrid was blackmailed. So some of these characters, Rubeus Hagrid, Tom Riddle, probably McGonagall, Slughorn, Dumbledore, will all or should show up at some point or get mentioned at the very least as far as what's happening at Hogwarts during Grindelwald's rise of power.
Would Tom Riddle be like reading the newspaper about Voldemort, or about Grindelwald, and being like, "Oh, I want to do something like that."
It couldn't hurt to get the idea. You always see.
There's got to be inspiration.
Yeah.
And then Tom Riddle's like, "But do we need all wizards? Like, how about? Do we really need those wizards that are half-blood? I don't think so."
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny that you say the reading of the newspaper and not to make a Star Wars reference, but I guess I can here. Remember when is it a young Boba Fett picks up the gun, right? Am I remembering this correctly?
I think it's a helmet.
The helmet. I'm sorry, the helmet. After his father is killed.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like that next. It's in a way it would be sort of previewing what is to come in later films, right?
Yeah.
It's the setup.
They are making a Boba Fett movie too. James Mangold.
Of course they are. I saw that on TV.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
And you know what? Based on how Solo's doing, I wouldn't be surprised if that got canceled, box office wise.
Interesting.
I thought that Solo was supposed to have a pretty big box office opening.
Yeah, and then like I said, they had to downgrade expectations because it isn't doing as well.
Oh.
Well, they didn't market it. I mean, we're not a movie podcast, but yeah, they didn't market it as well. And Avengers: Infinity War is still hot. It's still hot at the box office. It's still this huge, huge film, both released by Disney. It's like, well, they didn't give it any space. They wanted to hit Star Wars Day for the release weekend, and I think it's suffering from a lack of marketing.
And there's a Star Wars movie every year now, and I don't think people need that.
It's oversaturation,
right? That said, if we would never complain about a Wizarding World movie every year, that would be good for this podcast.
Yeah, I do want the Fantastic Beasts things to be out already. That would be great.
And Tom Riddle, I think, speaking of marketing, like being able to see the origin story of the Harry Potter series on a whole, I think would be very interesting. Just do a single movie about that. That would be a big deal, I think.
Yeah.
Lead up to just Tom Riddle origin story can go all the way to his quote unquote death and when killing the Potters.
Yeah.
How about Nicholas Flamel, Eric? You think that would be a good one?
We'll find out in Fantastic Beasts 2 if he is kind of a character that lives with humor and culture and exudes some wisdom. We'll see if his long life was worth living, if he's sort of like just an even funnier Dumbledore sort of character. But yeah, Nicholas Flamel, I mean, this guy's lived the longest. He's the human being who has lived for the most time. What are his thoughts? What is his viewpoint? How did he become the maker of the Philosopher's Stone? Like that, and alchemy as a subject is super interesting. Changing and metallurgy, changing one thing to another using alchemy, and the way that works in the wizarding world is something that I think J.K. Rowling knows a lot about. So I would like that to be turned into a story because I think it'd be pretty cool.
He's already going to be in Fantastic Beasts. But this one has the most legs in terms of you could probably create a 6-part series, if not more than that, given that you're going 666 years.
Yeah, I mean that's the Dark Ages through the Spanish Civil War. Through
Oh man, I'm so excited for Nicholas Flamel movie number 5. The first 4 just blew me away. Nah, I can't see it, guys. Sorry. That you could put that on the History Channel.
I knew that one was a bit of a stretch.
At least we're finding places for these films.
How about Molly and Arthur Weasley? Micah, would you like to see a Molly and Arthur Weasley origin story?
Lifetime.
Lifetime, yeah, that's a good Lifetime one.
Oh, I was expecting more of a gritty HBO, special.
I mean, they did have 7 kids, so
Jesus, I didn't say Cinemax, but for me, Arthur Weasley, I want to see who put him on his path towards appreciating and loving Muggle stuff. Like, was he like really sheltered as a boy? 'Cause, the Weasleys are purebloods, by the way, as a reminder. So, did his parents like not let him associate with Muggles? Did they homeschool him? What's his story that as soon as he was like, there's this other world out there, I got to go and explore it, and what inspired him? Like, I think there's a story in that moment of inspiration where he was like, I'm going to dedicate a big part of my life to like trying to figure out how airplanes stay up. Like, what was that?
It's like when any Muggle has an interest in something like trains, planes, automobiles. You just grow up with a burning passion for something. And for him, it was seeing how these other life forms get along in their day.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur Weasley would have a lot of fun with video games, I feel. Not only are they Muggle objects, but they're fun Muggle objects.
I think we actually just need to go and follow Mark Williams around in his real life and watch him interact with Muggle stuff.
But actually,
that could be
spending more time in the Burrow would actually be a lot of fun. It's one of the more whimsical places in the Wizarding World, in my opinion. And I'm not sure there's like a grand story there to put on film, but I would enjoy some time there, maybe on like TLC or HGTV. Watch as the Weasleys shop for their home. House Hunters, Wizarding Edition.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And then finally, in terms of our suggestions, Xenophilius Lovegood. Or maybe just the Lovegoods on a whole, because Luna's pretty wacky too.
Yeah, this would be a series kind of like, I'm going to say the Osbournes, because the Osbournes had prominence more than the Lovegoods do. But like just a wacky family kind of antics going, like what are their philosophies? How do they operate? Like, who's the matriarch and the patriarch, and what are they good parents, and that kind of thing. So, I'd be interested. Like these weird family from the other side of the hill.
This is like MTV, right?
Who are they?
Luna, what are you doing with that spell over there? I can't believe you're doing this.
No.
That's my Xenophilius as
definitely,
Ozzy impression.
Oh, he'd be way more mellow, though. Not that you can get more mellow than Ozzy, but.
I know what you mean. Yeah. And some of the theories that he subscribes to, I would love it if it were like a kind of like a Forrest Gump movie where it's like, Forrest was present at all of these big events, but he didn't know anything about them. But like instead, Xenophilius is present at a lot of like real life conspiracies that ultimately mean nothing and don't matter, but like he gets his like heart's content of like witnessing real conspiracies relating to, almost non-existent creatures or something like that, where you just like, we see inside the life and the head of a kind of wacky dude.
One of the Patreon benefits for Slug Club members is joining us before an episode once a month on a live stream. We just hang out, talk about what's going on in our days and, in the world of Harry Potter. And we had a few of our lady listeners joining us today. We asked them, who do you want to see a solo story for? Haley said Lupin and Tonks. Lottie said Lupin and Quirrell. Megan said McGonagall. And then she wrote on Patreon, please give us the Minerva backstory. Badass female super spy movie, tragic romance. How could they not? And then Miranda said Lupin as well. And then, like I said, we did ask for written answers to this question. That was everybody's homework at our little Hogwarts school over the past week. Micah, what was the first one?
Just a bunch of requests for Minerva, McGonagall, and the Marauders.
Yes. Sorry, I mean the first one after that.
Oh.
But yes, overall we did get a lot of McGonagall and Marauder ones.
Okay. Jemima says, the Ravenclaw family. Rowena's daughter grew up with some serious issues with her mother. Then there was the whole scary story of the Bloody Baron, which is glossed over in the books, but he must have been a serious psychopath to behave like he did, and to also fool Rowena into thinking he was a man to be trusted with Helena. The story can then include Salazar Slytherin, Helga Hufflepuff, and Godric Gryffindor, and their roles and involvement in this tragic story, and perhaps the whole debacle involving the Chamber of Secrets. Would love a story set in the Middle Ages, creation of Hogwarts. It would be awesome and wouldn't mess with any current character canon apart from fleshing out their forebears and how their families grew up with such different cultural attitudes to Muggles and purebloods. Thoughts?
I love this idea of doing a Hogwarts origin story, sort of the 4 greatest, brightest witches and wizards of their day found Hogwarts. They disagree, but framed over the lifetime of Rowena Ravenclaw and the people that are in her immediate, circle. I like the idea of the Bloody Baron, the intuition that he was very smart to fool her into let him court her daughter.
Yeah.
Stephanie said, Molly Weasley, please. Who is this badass woman? How are her parents so cool that they raised their children to combat dark magic to the extent that 2 of their sons would give their lives? She seems to be of a pureblood status, but clearly stands out. Did she and her brothers have to defy their ancient heritage? Did it help them blend into the upper echelons of wizard society and therefore help them to be better spies? Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah. Molly Weasley was such a badass parent, and her parents must have been even more so. I think Stephanie's correct in pointing that out.
Coming this fall. You remember her line from Deathly Hallows. Not my daughter, you bitch. Now learn how she formed that sentence. The origins of her attitude. This next one's from Gemily. Backstory is one of the main reasons Half-Blood Prince is by far my favorite Potter book and least favorite movie. We learned so much about Tom Riddle. Knowing how a villain becomes the way they are is absolutely fascinating to me. That being said, I think I'd want to know more about one of his followers, Bellatrix, Peter, or maybe Lucius. What path did their lives take that led them to such a dark experience? That's a great point.
It's a good... Yeah. I wonder if they did a Tom Riddle origin story, we'd be able to see him interacting with each of these people and kind of see what it is that makes him, manipulate them to, make them tick to want to be his son.
Yeah.
True. Makes me also think of Regulus Black. He could be a good contender for one of these stories as well.
Yeah, inside the ranks of the Death Eaters while having sort of a change of heart and getting cold feet and ultimately doing what's right. I love that.
Or even, seeing Peter listed here makes me think of Marauders, which we've always brought up, but I would just love a Marauder story to watch Peter go rogue. That would be sad.
Oh. Kaylee says, Lupin for sure. It will be fascinating to go back as far as when his transition occurred, and then following how he coped with that transition. Then seeing the everyday struggle of having that secret life as both a child and an adult would be interesting. It amazes me that he is the light spirit that he is despite the discrimination against him. Learning how he became the incredible mentor and friend that we met him as would be such an inspirational story. Yeah, I agree. What makes Lupin a good teacher, I wonder?
Amber says, I would love a Tom Riddle prequel showing us a bit about his childhood, his time at Hogwarts, and the time between when he graduated and killed the Potters. I feel like a lot of people really liked the flashbacks to his youth we got in HBP, so fans would be really into it. Also, I think Warner Brothers could market it as a darker version of Harry Potter meant for young adults and adults. Yeah, that's a good point, too. All these Harry Potter fans were all a little older now. So, we'd all turn out for an older Harry Potter story, similar to how we're all enjoying Fantastic Beasts because it focuses on older wizards and witches.
Right.
The last one is from Jerry, who says, a story about Kingsley Shacklebolt could be compelling. To be honest, we don't know that much about him. We know he's a well-respected Auror that becomes Minister of Magic after the final fall of Voldemort. Maybe there's something more that could be said about him.
But Jerry isn't saying it.
Sure there is.
I wonder how Kingsley developed his appreciation for style.
You remember his line, Dumbledore's got style. Now learn how he decided to form those words. All right, well, thanks everybody who contributed there. Another way our listeners contribute is via email. Roshni wrote in about last week's discussion on mothers. Was it last week? Was it 2 weeks ago? I can't keep it straight anymore. Roshni said, I am a little disappointed with your discussion about Tonks of the Battle. Oh, this was last week. I remember when I was reading the book, I was annoyed that Tonks was home with the kid. Tonks is a badass Auror. Why should she be the one who stayed home? Like Nassim mentioned, if anyone was going to stay home, it should have been Remus. It would have been totally out of character for Tonks to not be fighting. I think our opinion is colored by the fact that we know the outcome, which, of course, sucked. However, think about the impact Voldemort's rule has impacted both Remus and Tonks. Bellatrix made it her mission to kill Tonks, and the whole family was targeted by laws against werewolves. Tonks had a right to be there, and anyone who feels she shouldn't have left her child should also be angry that Remus did as well. Also, parents might not also know if their child enlists at 18. Now people have a choice, but think about when there was a draft. The of-age kids also had a right to be there. Just want to make sure we weren't favoring a patriarchal view on Tonks' actions. No, I agree with that, and that's why we ended up mentioning Remus as well. But my only point was one of them should have stayed home with the kid just in case, God forbid, we did lose both of them, like we did.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we really loved Nazim's idea about it being Lupin that stayed home, and I don't have a single problem with Tonks coming to fight in the battle. My point was, in the books, you know, when she does show up, she is grief-stricken and searching for Remus the entire time. It's not like she's here like, let's get to work. Instead, she is distracted and kind of reduced to being his wife versus the badass Auror that she is. So I think I criticize how the writing portrays her. I do not criticize her as a character. Need to be very clear.
I'll give you a Bruce Springsteen example. When Bruce and Patty, his wife, had kids, they were still touring after that. They would take separate planes to the different cities. Why? Because if one of the planes went down, the kids wouldn't lose both their parents. It's a backup plan.
Oh.
Remus or Tonks should have stayed home as a backup plan for one of the kids. For Teddy.
Now I'm thinking of movies with Jennifer Aniston in them.
Why?
The backup plan. That's a movie.
I see.
Anyway.
I have a great plan.
It's also why the president and the vice president never travel together.
Right. Yes.
Right. Oh, it wasn't Jennifer Aniston. It was Jennifer Lopez. That's my bad.
Of course. Well, I have a good plan for anybody who wants to make some good food over the summer. I want to tell you about this week's sponsor, Blue Apron. Like I said earlier in this episode, summer is here, and what better time to shake up your dinners than right now with Blue Apron? Get the grill going again. Cook some special meals that you can eat outside. What I love about Blue Apron is that they make cooking delicious and original meal ideas super easy. Normally, when you have an idea for a meal, you got to do a big trip to the food store. And if you're cooking something you haven't done before, you got to find all these ingredients. It's stressful. It takes too much time. With Blue Apron, you get to make new, exciting, and impressive meals without it being difficult. This weekend, beautiful weekend here in Chicago, the boyfriend and I cooked up barbecue pork burgers with a side of pickled peppered coleslaw and roasted potatoes. They had some aged white cheddar on them. Delicious. And instead of spending part of the day at the food store getting all the ingredients together, finding them all so we can make sure we get this right, everything came straight to us. We got out of Solo, came home, and got cooking straight away. It's really, really great. This is some really good stuff. I want you to try Blue Apron. This is the way to create some incredible meals. They give you 12 new recipes to enjoy each week, and you can pick 2, 3, or 4 of those recipes based on what best fits your schedule. So you don't have to commit to a lot of food here. You just get what you need. Shake up your routine. You'll be proud of yourself when you sit down to enjoy your meals. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free at blueapron.com/MuggleCast. Blue Apron is a better way to cook this summer. Do it. Free food, y'all. blueapron.com/MuggleCast. All right, let's hear from some of our listeners now. Enough from us. Let's start with a couple of reactions to Cursed Child. Some of our listeners have been seeing it.
Hey guys, my name is Yanni. I'm from Australia, but I currently live in New York. I've left a voicemail before, but it never got played on an episode, but I assume that was because my message didn't go through or there was a sound issue. Either way, I hope it wasn't because it was too boring and you didn't want to play it on the air. Anyway, I just saw Cursed Child Part 2 here in New York because my friend had 2 extra tickets and I tagged along with her. And I never understood why you guys gave it such a hard time, but now I understand. I didn't see Part 1, but I saw Part 2, and the story is seriously flawed, and it's very unoriginal, and the forced heterosexual relationships between the kids made me so mad. They had set up such a good romance between Scorpius and Albus. I just didn't see why they didn't just take that. It makes me think that maybe the high prices made fans like the show even more because they want to make it worth their money. Also, McGonagall in the play is kind of a bitch. She literally says, "Shame on you, Hermione Granger," at one point. I didn't like that at all. But all that aside, I still did kind of enjoy seeing Harry Potter on stage. Let me know what you guys think about what I said. Thanks for doing the podcast. I really enjoy listening to you guys, and thanks.
Shame on you, Hermione Granger.
I'm with McGonagall on that. I mean, I forget exactly the circumstances, but Hermione lets children into her office to steal what should be the most guarded item in the history of ever, and I don't think that's excusable.
Did this listener say his name was Yanni or Laurel? I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I'm still debating what color the dress is, so I don't know.
All right, we have another Cursed Child review, and this one is more positive.
Hi, MuggleCast. This is Katie. I'm calling from New York City. I just watched the Cursed Child Parts 1 and 2 yesterday, so I waited to listen to your review following that. And I really liked your evaluation and everything, especially about the story versus the magic, blah, blah, blah. But there was something Eric said that I have a bone to pick with about the end scene where Harry watches the death of Lily and James, and they kind of don't give him enough attention in this story on this fact that he acknowledges that despite the fact that he did destroy the physical part of Voldemort in his soul, he was mentally not rid of him. And I think that's what they were really trying to accomplish with the dreams sequences and, the reemergence of Parseltongue and a scar hurting, was that it was yet not really fully let go of that. And it comes out in his relationship with Albus, and the end of seeing that and seeing that actor Jamie Parker perform in that way was just utterly gut-wrenching, cathartic. I felt like any Harry Potter fan that feels the way, that feels that kind of emotion during the Godric's Hollows scenes appreciates it too. So that's it. Just wanted to defend that choice. Anyway, hope you guys have a great rest of your week and enjoy this beautiful weather. Bye.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, hey, how are you? What was that at the end?
As somebody showed up at the end of that voicemail.
So not agreeing with you there on the end scene, Eric.
That's okay. Yeah.
I can't exactly remember what you said, but I will say something. There is something so moving about watching Harry watch his parents die. Yeah. Because Harry, Ron, Hermione, Albus, Scorpius, I think Rose too, they're all staring into the audience, and you're looking back at them, and we're all hearing Voldemort kill Lily and James. That is gut-wrenching to watch.
Yeah. The only thing I think I said about it was that it was sort of torturous and unnecessary to Harry from a character point, but I completely see why the significance, why people love it, and Jamie Parker does an amazing job at it, so I would tend to agree with a lot of these thoughts.
One more Cursed Child-related voicemail today.
Hey guys, it's Marissa. I was listening to the most recent episode, and you were discussing how Voldemort could have ever fathered a child, and I think there are a lot of good arguments against Cursed Child, but I think that this is one of the weakest ones, because we know that in the Muggle world we have things like artificial insemination, so you don't actually have to have sex to create a baby, and so I feel like in the wizard world that would be entirely possible too. So I think it would have all been very scientific. I don't think he would have ever have had sex with Bellatrix, but he would have chosen her in a moment of weakness as like a plan B to have this baby, to be like an incubator for this baby. So like I said, I think there are lots of good criticism against Cursed Child, but I feel like that's one of the weakest arguments out there because, I mean, even, we have science, and wizards always have an equivalent to that science. So it's just my thoughts. Thanks.
I'm into that. Artificial insemination or something similar.
Micah, do you have any thoughts?
On how these two conceived a child?
Yes.
Whether it's more likely that they did it without doing it than they did it with doing it?
I would ask the two who wrote the play to explain a little bit more how this all came about. No, I mean, I Bellatrix, it never seemed to me, at least, that Voldemort ever gave the attention to Bellatrix that she gave to him, right? There was am I wrong about that? I mean, she was obviously very enamored by him, very subservient in many ways, but it just seems like if it was something that Voldemort wanted in the moment and decided, okay, you know what, I need somebody to carry on, which doesn't make any sense because he's somebody who's so just he's just fixated on living forever, right? And
right.
Creating these Horcruxes and binding himself to the earth and finding the Hollows, right? And becoming the Master of Death. Doesn't sound like somebody who's like, oh yeah, I want somebody who's going to be able to continue on my lineage after I'm gone, right? So I don't know. It seems very out of character for Voldemort. Not so much Bellatrix. I don't think she would have loved the idea. It sounds like, but Voldemort just doesn't strike me as the type of person who would even think about something like that. At least not by the time we get to Malfoy Manor, unless maybe that's when he's starting to feel things slip a little bit. Maybe that's the explanation, is that some of these Hallows are the Horcruxes are starting to be destroyed. He's starting to catch on, which is interesting because he does in the movie, which plays well in the movie, but he doesn't really in the book. At least I don't remember it that way, that he's catching on to what's happening.
Right.
But all that said, maybe it was just a moment that the two of them had in Malfoy Manor, and that was it. I don't know.
I think what upset people a lot about this is because Voldemort is just not that type of person to love. Bellatrix was in love with Voldemort, but not the other way around. So that's why I can buy this artificial insemination idea or something similar, because
I don't think it's any more likely, though. Like, I don't see it as any more likely that they did that versus just doing the deed or whatever, Like,
I'm just going to say if it does happen, it works like extracting a memory from your mind.
Oh, God. Stop.
All right, and let's move on.
Oh, my God.
Hi, my name is Princess. I am calling from Toronto, and I'm just calling about MuggleCast's last episode, talking about how in Fantastic Beasts that Dumbledore is now a DADA professor, and in my opinion, I am also a bit disappointed with that. I always thought that it was really cool that Transfiguration was a lot more, I guess, just not as explored the same way Defense Against the Dark Arts is. And I think Transfiguration has a lot more theory, and it fits really well with Dumbledore being an academic and a scholar, and having written all these, I guess, journal articles about Transfiguration. And so I really wish we got a chance to see more of that. So I guess I wanted to hear what you guys think. I love the show. It definitely keeps my days going here during the winters up in Toronto. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, Princess. What a name.
Yeah.
I still am holding out hope that we are going to learn about Dumbledore being a Transfiguration teacher. But that also is a good point that, like, we've had enough of Defense Against the Dark Arts in these books and movies. Show us something different.
Did that clip ever surface or not yet?
Not yet. the clip we discussed a few weeks ago.
The one that they showed to shareholders or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but, like, why do we need to see more DADA? Like, it's not that great. Come on. It's good, but it doesn't have to be every...
Yeah. It's just because the rest of the movie, they're facing off against the darkest wizard of the time.
Yeah. All right, here's another voicemail.
Hey, MuggleCast. It's Jenny from Colorado. I'm on my reread, book 4 now. Just wondering why you think Percy was sorted into Gryffindor. Ron just said he's always been really ambitious, which is more of a Slytherin trait. He's always been very smart. Maybe he could be a Ravenclaw. Let's know your thoughts. Hope you're having a good week. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, I mean, Percy's a butt face, and I don't think he deserves to be in Gryffindor. He just
gets... a lot of Gryffindors are butt faces.
Yeah, but, I mean, he sides with the Ministry over his own family. But that aside, you know, Jenny was bringing up some good points, too, about why he might be in Slytherin, being really ambitious. I mean, he's one of the most ambitious people. He's right up there with Hermione.
I think it was possibly his family that got him into Gryffindor. I mean, if he has a long history and he could have asked to be put there, maybe when he was 11, he was a little bit more shy, you know, and he kind of grew further away from Gryffindor traits, as J.K. Rowling once said on Twitter that Pettigrew did as well. I mean, Percy is more Gryffindor than Pettigrew was, I think. But it's all a spectrum, and I think that maybe it's just that, you know, he is part of a family of 7 pure-blood siblings, and, you know, his whole family's in Gryffindor. I think it was just a natural thing for the hat to be like, yeah, you know, you're not too much of an outlier, I'll put you in Gryffindor. And that was probably how that worked.
In his origin story movie, we're going to see him in the sorting process, and he's going to be going, not Slytherin, not Ravenclaw, not Hufflepuff.
Not Hufflepuff, eh? You sure?
Everybody says that, who goes under this hat.
Yeah.
Apologies, Hufflepuffs, I'm sorry. Here's another voicemail.
Hey, guys. My name is Jory Seegers from Elkhart, Indiana, longtime listener. Actually just recently jumped back into listening to you guys. I remember downloading your guys' first podcast on my iPod video back in 2005, back in the olden days, but I was just recently listening to the episode where you guys were talking about Pottermore and when they let go all those writers and editorial people and all of that and whatnot. Very sad. But you guys are talking a lot about the old school days of Flash animation and what we'd like to see Pottermore be. You guys are just giving me a lot of nostalgic vibes this past week listening to you guys, but it made me think of old school RPG role-playing where you would just be with a bunch of people and you would just be pretending and writing your own story and waiting for them to respond. And I just thought it'd be really cool if you guys did a podcast one time just talking about where you guys started back when you put your stuff out there on MuggleNet. And I remember there was another episode where you guys were talking about Joe's old website about like, oh, is Joe going to be in today and whatnot. But I remember she had a trophy case that you could click on for the top, like, fan site, and MuggleNet was on there. And one of the RPG sites that I used to be on, Tabs Hogwarts, was also awarded on there, too. So I just thought it would be really cool, I don't know, just to hear from the fandom. Like, you guys have given so much to us, and how you guys talk about Pottermore, about some of the other fan sites. Like, they know a lot more and, like, sources, whereas Pottermore can't say a whole lot. And I'm sorry if I sound really ranty. I've just been a huge fan of you guys. And, yeah, so thanks, guys.
I thought it'd be interesting to share what we were doing in the fandom outside of MuggleCast. Because we're always so focused on MuggleCast now. So I thought this was a cool question. I got my start at MuggleNet through, well, first of all, I had my own Harry Potter fan site called Harry Potter's House, and later the Potter Profile, because I forgot to renew harrypottershouse.com, and it got snapped up by somebody else, so I had to change the name of my site. It was devastating for teenage Andrew. But so I was doing my own Harry Potter site, and then, of course, I wanted to work for MuggleNet because, it was MuggleNet. It was the Harry Potter site. And they had a job opening for, like, content writers or something like that. And I applied, and I knew somebody on the inside who could maybe get me in. So I was like, please help me work for MuggleNet. And they did. And my first job at MuggleNet was creating a section for J.K. Rowling's website, which is kind of funny because that relates to this voicemail, always checking out her awesome website. So, yeah, that was my gig at MuggleNet. It was maintaining that, and then I just started doing more and more, and then I was running a lot of the site and writing the news and stuff like that. So, Eric, you've been on MuggleNet for a long time.
I still am, yeah, since 2002. This person who sent this voicemail in, being from Elkhart, is very fitting, as MuggleNet is from LaPorte, Indiana. Emerson is from LaPorte. He grew up in LaPorte, and that, started the site. So fellow Indiana as your starter for the website, but I started off doing the weekly caption contest. We'd take a screenshot from the film, and people would send in captions, and it ran for 5 years solid, and another 2 before the website stopped working with the code, and it had to unfortunately close. But I've role-played before in the world of Harry Potter. I used to play, I think, like Lupin in chat rooms and stuff on like old AOL. So I totally relate to this voicemail sender as well, of like living in the world of Harry and stuff. So and I've done other things on MuggleNet over the. Currently I'm basically like an editor. Like I'll edit things, spruce things up, go on set visits or site visits to like Harry Potter things. That's what I do on MuggleNet now. But throughout the years, just little sections here and there. Like I've worked on name origins, I've worked on song parodies. There's a section called Dear Hogwarts where we actually got to role play as teachers. Like we had dedicated writers as Hogwarts professors, and you could write a letter as if you were writing it to the Hogwarts professor, and they responded. It was really, really fun. But that's kind of what I'm doing, or what I did lately, other than MuggleNet. And obviously when MuggleCast came around, that got all the attention.
And then for me, I think it was just after the first episode of MuggleCast was released, I reached out to Kevin Steck and put me in touch with somebody named Andrew Sims. Not
Yes,
sure who
that's
that
true.
guy is. What's that?
Yes, that's true.
That is true.
You
And,
reached out to me, Kevin.
I actually got my start doing the transcripts for MuggleCast, and then eventually, Andrew, I think you reached out and said, would you be interested in doing the news? And
Yeah, I don't know why I asked you that, but
well, I think maybe that's what I initially had pitched, is that you needed a quick kind of news roundup at the beginning of the show. Not that you couldn't talk about the topics, but it'd be interesting to kind of play back some of those older segments that that we did, because that format of the show pretty much stayed the way that it was for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Micah would pre-record the news segment and we would edit it in later.
Yeah.
And then one day, I think I was just like, why are we doing the news pre-recorded and then like essentially repeating it all when we're actually talking about it? So then we had the brilliant idea of, talking about each news story as we read it, like we do today.
Right.
And that may have been how you actually got involved in the show as like a co-host.
yeah, I think that's right. I think after doing the news, you said, why don't you hang around, and became part of the rotation. But as far as MuggleNet, I mean, I worked on a lot of different sections of the site, particularly name origins was a focus of mine. And really, over time, I think just one thing led to another, and kind of led the site for a while before kind of moving on to do different things, but always sticking with the podcast. And I'm happy to see the success that the site still has today, that it's still going strong and coming up with new and different ideas. It's definitely something that's been a part of all of our lives, for probably the better part of 10 years, and Eric, longer for you. So as far as today now, I mean, really for me, the main thing is the podcast. I'll take, the opportunities when they come along to go and travel a bit, and whether Andrew and I were down at the park not that long ago, earlier this year, or other things like that, going to see Cursed Child, but primarily for me, the focus is the podcast, conventions here or there when work doesn't get in the way, but it's definitely been interesting to watch this community really evolve and become what it is. It's very unique, and I know there are others out there for different things that people are passionate about, but I've always felt that Potter has sort of come alive in the age of the internet and social media, and that has really benefited it in terms of just the amount of people that have connected with each other through the series, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the future holds.
All right. To wrap up today's show, let's play some Quizzitch.
Woohoo! Well, last week's question was as follows. It was Battle of Hogwarts themed. What does Harry see at Hogwarts that reminds him of where the lost diadem is hidden? And this is from the chapter, The Battle of Hogwarts. Essentially, if we'll recall, there's a stray spell that comes in through the window because a lot is going on. And it happens to knock the gargoyles off of their pedestal. There's 2 gargoyles that guard the staff room. And Harry happens to be looking at one of the faces of this ugly gargoyle and has sort of a eureka moment where he then pictures the ugly stone bust of Rowena Ravenclaw, both in the Lovegoods home, and eventually he gets back to the statue that had a tiara on it inside the Room of Requirement. So the correct answer to last week's Quizzitch question was the face of the stone gargoyle is what Harry sees. That reminds him of where the diadem is hidden. And we only had, that I could find, 3 winners who sent in the answer on Twitter, and they were recurring winner Sean Brady, Roshni B, and Nathaniel Stevens.
So a tough one.
And Nathaniel actually writes in, I remember this exactly because I wasn't a fan of that moment. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, yeah, it's like a convenient sort of, oh my gosh, eureka. It all makes sense now.
That and the fact that moments before Ron bluffed his way into the Chamber of Secrets by speaking fakes, like imitating Harry's Parseltongue, are the 2 most convenient things, and they happen back to back. So I get it.
That got, I remember we were hard on that when the book came out.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, but I don't know. I can buy that one. Actually, isn't there a scene like that in Solo?
Yeah. Well, Solo speaks Wookiee.
Yeah, he suddenly speaks Wookiee, right?
Yeah, but like the human
spoiler
throat shouldn't really be able to do that,
right? And he can actually communicate with Chewie.
Yeah. A little bit poorly. I liked the subtitles in that scene, but anyway, we were talking about cool Kingsley Shacklebolt, so I'm going to throw him into this next week's Quizzitch question. What is the form of Kingsley Shacklebolt's Patronus? It's a little bit easier one because I want to get more people Submit your answers to us over Twitter at MuggleCast, and just say this week's Quizzitch answer is blank, and then I will find it. But a little question about Kingsley, and definitely want to see some fresh blood playing the game.
Yeah. All right. So before we say goodbye, we have a little bit of an announcement. So in June marks 15 years since Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix was published. And we actually thought for a time that we hadn't done chapter by chapter for Order of the Phoenix. Turns out we were wrong, and our patrons told us that, so thank you. But what we're going to do instead, to celebrate 15 years since Order of the Phoenix came out, we are going to spend some time in each episode of MuggleCast in June discussing elements of the 5th Harry Potter book. One of our discussions will be definitely based on the Department of Mysteries. We've spoken about that. I think a couple months ago we were saying we got to do something on the Department of Mysteries. So we're finally going to do that in June. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll also just look back at that summer and those midnight release parties. So we'll have some fun with Order of the Phoenix. And then in July, we'll have another fun launch, which we've already announced to patrons. We will announce to the rest of you in the weeks ahead once we firm up our plans. So it's going to be a good summer of MuggleCast. And then Eric and I, by the way, will be at LeakyCon in the beginning of August down in Texas.
Dallas, Texas, August 10th to the 12th, 2018.
Cool. So that'll be fun. Tickets are sold out, but if you want to check out the website, learn more about what's going to be going on there, check it out at LeakyCon.com. You can also give them your email address so you can learn about future events, which will probably also sell out very quickly. So do that and stay abreast of the situation. Mm-hmm. Plug for MuggleCast.com. You can get our voicemail number there. You can write to us via the feedback form, or you can just email us, MuggleCast@gmail.com. Our phone number, by the way, is 1-920-3-MUGGLE. That's 1-920-368-4453. Also, follow us on Twitter to participate in those Quizzitch questions and stay up to date on episode information. Twitter.com/MuggleCast and Facebook.com/MuggleCast is where we are on the social medias. And finally, a plug for our Patreon, Patreon.com/MuggleCast. By the way, we'll have a new bonus MuggleCast up about the Elder Wand. We got a funny voicemail about the Elder Wand in Fantastic Beasts and its loyalty, so we answer that. And also talk about a theory about Dumbledore's "it has to be you" line in the trailer and how that could relate to the Elder Wands. All right, thanks everybody for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Micah.
See you next time for 371. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.